When the sons of Jacob first arrived in Egypt, they numbered just 70 people. Over the generations, they multiplied and grew exceedingly strong, filling the land. This population boom terrified a paranoid new Egyptian king. Fearing the Israelites might ally with his enemies in a war, Pharaoh set taskmasters over them, forcing them to churn out endless supplies of mortar and mud brick to build the massive store cities of Pithom and Ramses. But the heavy labor didn't stop the Israelites from multiplying, so Pharaoh escalated his cruelty. He bypassed the labor camps entirely and issued a mandate to his own people. Every newborn Hebrew boy was to be seized and cast into the Nile. Only one child is recorded as surviving this exact decree. A Levite woman hid her infant son in a waterproof basket of bulrushes and left him among the river reeds. He was found by Pharaoh's own daughter. She took pity on the crying child, adopted him, and named him Moses. A Hebrew boy marked for death was now being raised inside the heart of the royal household. Moses grew up navigating this deep cultural divide until a single violent act forced his hand. Seeing an Egyptian overseer beating a Hebrew slave, Moses checked to ensure he was alone, struck down the Egyptian, and buried him in the sand. When Pharaoh discovered the murder, Moses fled for his life, abandoning Egypt entirely to live as a foreigner in the arid land of Midian. Moses is now an outcast living in Midian, but his background remains a unique anomaly. A shepherd with a royal education, a fugitive with slave heritage, possessing intimate knowledge of the court he is now hiding from. While leading his father-in-law's flock near Mount Horeb, Moses notices a physical impossibility. A desert bush is engulfed in a roaring flame of fire, yet the leaves and branches are not consumed. Moses steps closer to investigate the anomaly. A voice calls out from the center of the flames, identifying itself as the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. God introduces himself with the name I Am. He then makes it clear that the suffering in Egypt has not gone unnoticed. He has seen the affliction, heard the cries of the slaves, and knows their exact miseries. God gives Moses a staggering mandate: return to Pharaoh and demand the total release of the Israelite labor force. Moses immediately protests his lack of authority and his slow speech. God counters by asking Moses who made man's mouth in the first place, and appoints Moses' brother, Aaron, to act as his official spokesman. Moses packs his family onto a donkey and takes his shepherd's staff in hand. He is leaving the Midian desert to confront the very king he fled, demanding the departure of an entire workforce from the most powerful empire on earth. When Moses and Aaron first deliver the demand, Pharaoh is entirely dismissive. He refuses to recognize their God and immediately retaliates against the slaves. He cuts off their supply of straw, forcing them to scavenge for their own materials, while strictly enforcing the same daily quota of bricks. In response to Pharaoh's arrogance, God initiates a systematic dismantling of the Egyptian ecosystem and economy. Over a series of 10 plagues, the Nile turns to blood, killing the fish and ruining the water supply. Frogs, gnats, and flies overrun the land. A severe pestilence wipes out the Egyptian livestock, and boils break out on the people. Then, dense swarms of locusts arrive on an east wind, devouring whatever green plants a massive hailstorm left behind. The final plague strikes at the human cost. At midnight, every firstborn in the land of Egypt is slated to die. The Israelites are given a highly specific mechanism for survival. They must sacrifice a year-old unblemished lamb and paint its blood on the lintels and doorposts of their homes. Seeing this mark, the destroyer passes over their houses. The resulting devastation finally breaks Pharaoh. He orders the Israelites out in the middle of the night. Over 600,000 men, plus women, children, and livestock, march out in haste. But shortly after they leave, Pharaoh changes his mind. He mobilizes 600 of his best chariots and the full weight of the Egyptian army, cornering the fleeing Israelites against the sea. Trapped between the water and the chariots, Moses stretches his staff over the sea. A strong east wind drives the waters back, exposing the seabed. The Israelites cross safely on dry ground, flanked by walls of water. When the Egyptian forces pursue him into the basin, the water collapses back into its normal course, drowning Pharaoh's elite forces without a single survivor. Watching the dead wash up on the shore, the Israelites realize their physical ties to Egyptian slavery are permanently severed. The whips and taskmasters are gone. But their survival has immediately thrust them into a new reality. They are completely alone in the desert. The euphoria of liberation quickly collides with the logistics of survival. Millions of refugees are now marching through the wilderness of sin, a barren landscape entirely devoid of food and water. Hunger sets in, and the people quickly turn on Moses, complaining they would have preferred to die near the meat pots of Egypt rather than starve in the open desert. To keep the population alive, God intervenes with daily rations. Every morning, a flaky substance resembling frost, which they call manna, appears on the ground for the people to gather and bake. When they later face a total lack of water at Rephidim, Moses is instructed to strike a specific rock at Horeb, and fresh water pours out for the camp. Physical survival is secured, but an administrative crisis quickly emerges. When Moses' father-in-law, Jethro, visits the camp, he observes Moses sitting alone from morning until evening, trying to manually mediate every minor dispute for the entire population. Jethro warns Moses that this approach is unsustainable and will guarantee burnout. Jethro proposes a decentralized bureaucracy. He advises Moses to select trustworthy men who hate bribes and assign them as judges over specific groupings of the population, chiefs of thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens. These localized judges handle the daily disputes, passing only the most complex cases up the chain to Moses. This structural shift shows the wilderness serving as a civic crucible. The harsh conditions forced a disorganized mob of former slaves to rapidly evolve into a structured society capable of managing its own people. In the 3rd month after leaving Egypt, the Israelites arrive at the base of Mount Sinai. The arrival of the divine presence on the peak is terrifying. The mountain trembles violently under a thick cloud, wrapped in smoke like a kiln, while flashes of fire and thunderclaps echo through the camp. From this smoke, God establishes a bedrock moral law. The 10 Commandments are delivered, strictly prohibiting the worship of other gods and laying down rules against murder, theft, and false witness. It dictates exactly how this newly freed people must relate to God and to one another. This moral foundation is followed by the Book of the Covenant, a granular civic and legal code. It regulates everyday societal mechanics, from property rights and restitution for injury to the rules governing the treatment of slaves and the protection of vulnerable widows and orphans. Moses reads this extensive legal code aloud to the entire assembly. In a formal ratification ceremony, the people answer with a single voice, "All the words that the Lord has spoken, we will do." Moses writes down the laws and seals the agreement by throwing the blood of sacrificed oxen over the people. By agreeing to these terms, the Israelites have transitioned from refugees to a sovereign nation. They are no longer defined simply by their escape from Pharaoh, but by a shared code of conduct and a mutual covenant with their God. Following the ratification, Moses is called further up the mountain, disappearing into the cloud for 40 days and 40 nights. There, he receives the physical blueprints for a structure that will allow the divine presence to dwell in the center of their camp. The instructions for this tabernacle are hyper-specific. They require acacia wood overlaid with pure gold for the Ark of the Covenant, and carefully woven linen in blue, purple, and scarlet for elaborate priestly garments. The raw materials, gold, silver, and bronze, are sourced directly from the wealth the Israelites carried out of Egypt. To execute these designs, God specifically appoints Bezalel and Aholiab. They are filled with ability and knowledge in all craftsmanship, from carving wood to cutting precious stones, to manage the complex engineering and artistic requirements of the project. The journey that began under the whip of a king ends here. The same people who once built store cities for Pharaoh out of mud and straw are now using their own wealth and skills to build a sanctuary for God. They have moved from forced labor to a society that freely organizes its talents to host the divine presence in their midst.